Well, we're now joined by the Environment and Climate Change Minister, Steven Guilbeault. He joins us from the site of the COP27 conference in Egypt. Minister, thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much, Michael.
Now, as we heard going into this, you are urging other countries to adopt carbon pricing the way Canada has, really as a means of addressing climate change. But I also think it's fair to say that there are many Canadians who are still not convinced that carbon pricing works. Their bills are going up, but Canadians are still using gas to get around, to heat their homes. Carbon is a byproduct of agricultural production. What do you say to Canadians who are still doubtful, if not resentful, about carbon pricing?
Well, the first thing is that carbon pricing is known to be one, if not the most effective measures to fight climate pollution. And we know that climate change is impacting Canadians more and more. And it's, as we've seen with Fiona, for example, in Atlantic Canada, it's costing lives and it's costing Canadians billions of dollars every year. And one of the things that on the international scene here in Sharm el-Sheikh, one of the features of the Canadian pricing system, the carbon pricing system, that is attracting a lot of attention is the fact that we recycle 90% of the revenues from the system back to Canadians, and those Canadians get more money back from the federal government than what it's costing them for the pricing system. So they're better off with it than without it. And for countries, I've been talking, for example, to a country like Colombia or Chile, or even the Brazilian transition government, the new Lula government, who really like this idea of using people who have more money, which is what we're doing in Canada. People who have more money are basically supporting the people in the middle class and lower income Canadians through this system, because the richest among us don't receive money back from the federal government because they can afford to take the impact of pricing. So, and that's, I was on stage with the Environment Minister of Chile, for example, when we launched that carbon pricing challenge, and she said that, you know, that's one of the very interesting elements of what Canada's doing on pricing pollution.
And yet there is, as you probably know, a Leger poll out now. It was conducted online, but it states that 77% of people surveyed want a freeze on the current carbon price as a response to inflation. What does that tell you about the public support for the policy here in Canada when measured against more bread and butter issues like food, housing, and heating that people are having to pay for?
I'm sorry, being in Egypt, I haven't seen that poll, so I can't comment on it. But we've fought the last 3 federal elections where pricing pollution was not the only issue on the ballot box, but clearly one of the issues on the ballot box. And as Canadians start 4 times a year receiving checks from the federal government to help them face the impact of inflation while fighting pollution at the same time. Because I think if we were to do a poll asking Canadians, do you think Canada should be doing its part to fight climate change? Do you think you would like to do your part to fight climate change? I suspect that the level of support for something like that would also be very high.
Mm-hmm. Now, there does continue to be about criticism when it comes back to COP27. Criticism for the number of oil and gas companies who are present at the conference, reportedly over 600 representatives, many of them going as part of the official Canadian delegation. What do you say to the criticism of the presence of those companies?
Canada is an open and democratic society. We do have 2 representatives of oil and gas sector on the Canadian delegation, but we have youth on the Canadian delegation. We have Indigenous youth, we have Indigenous leaders, we have trade union leaders, we have environmental organizations. In a society like ours, I think, you know, it's a very slippery slope when the government starts saying, well, it's okay for you to come, but it's not okay for you. We're democratic and open, or we're not. That being said, the oil and gas sector has an important role to play, a key role to play in reducing carbon pollution in Canada. And I've said so publicly recently, I'm a bit disappointed by what I'm seeing right now in terms of their level of investment in the transition. They've sent billions of dollars to their shareholders. They have the right to do that. But what I would like to see from them is investment to ensure that this industry has a future in a world where we will be consuming less and less oil, that those workers and those communities that depend on the oil and gas sector have a future. And we're putting our money where our mouth is. We've offered subsidies, tax breaks to help these companies make important investment. So I'm very eager to see them come to the table and really work with us to help reduce pollution in Canada.
Well, in addition to that, or to that in general, your government will be placing an emissions cap on oil and gas sometime next year.
Correct.
But as you know, environmental groups want that regulation, that cap to come out sooner. You've been on that side of the issue with Équiterre. Why not move sooner on putting a cap on oil and gas?
Frankly, I think this request from environmental organization is unreasonable, and they know that. They know that in a country like ours, when we want to adopt new laws or new regulations, we have to do consultations with provinces and territories. We have a constitutional duty to do that, as well as with Indigenous people. But we also are happy to receive advice from environmental organizations, from experts, and from companies. And it takes time to do that. The last piece of regulation that we published, Environment Canada, this year, took 5 years to develop. And for me, that's too long. The commitment that I've made to environmental groups, to Canadians, to companies, is that going forward, the new piece of regulations that we will develop in Canada, our aim is to do that in 2 years, to cut in half the time it takes. But we can't do that overnight. In a society like ours, people have a right to express their views, and in some cases, a constitutional right. And we need to proceed in a very lawful manner, and that's what we're doing in Canada.
Okay, I appreciate what you're saying about consultation, but the goal, as stated by your own government, is to get to net zero within the next 30 years. But the latest climate change performance index that came out at this COP, it has Canada ranked 5th from the bottom, not far from Kazakhstan, not far from Saudi Arabia. So how can you maintain that target if Canada, as compared to the rest of the world, is under-delivering?
Well, one of the issues is that not much was done in terms of fighting climate change in Canada for a very long time, and we are playing catch-up, and I'm the first one to recognize it. And many of the things that we're doing will take time. So we're investing $30 billion in transit. So there are right now 300 transit projects under construction in the country. Now, you can't, like it's being done in Toronto, you can't construct a new subway line overnight. It's going to take a few years. There's a new light train system being built in Montreal. It's going to come online next year. Same thing with electrification of our transportation system. The federal government has announced 10 different deals worth $15 billion to transform Canada's auto sector, to produce electric vehicles, to produce battery components for electric vehicles, to produce batteries. This is happening now. So I'm the first one to recognize we need to do more, and we need to do it faster. But it's starting to happen in Canada. But we won't change our society overnight. It will take many years to get there.
But you think we can still meet the goal by 2050?
Oh, absolutely.
Minister Guilbeault, thank you so much for the time.
Thank you very much, Michael. Take care.
You too.